Hello again everyone, and today's video is kind of like a part 2 to a video that I uploaded recently, which was all about planning a trip to Disneyland. Now, what I went into in the first video, which I will of course link down below in the description box, I talked about deciding when you want to go to Disneyland and for how long you can go to Disneyland, and then once you've decided those things, looking into your plane tickets and your hotels and of course your park tickets. After all of those things have been done, I think we can kind of move into the fun stuff, or at least what I consider to be the fun stuff. Not that none of that was fun, but I have found that some of that stuff that I talked about in part 1 of this video can be a little bit stressful. When you're looking at plane tickets and hotels especially, they're so expensive and it can be really stressful. But I hope if you have watched part 1 about planning a trip to Disneyland, I hope some of it helped you at least, or at least you found it entertaining and enjoyed hearing about the ways that I have planned our trips to Disneyland. Now if you haven't seen part 1, I'll just give you a tiny bit of background, which is that I have so far planned 2 trips to Disneyland, which is not all that many, but I have enjoyed the process of planning a trip to Disneyland so much that I thought it would be really fun to make a couple of videos about it. Our first trip to Disneyland was back in December of 2015, so almost a year ago, and we loved it so much that we decided we wanted to go back this year. So we're going this December of 2016. So without further ado, let's get into the rest of the steps that I have done when planning our trips to Disneyland. So like I have said, I think after you have booked your plane tickets and booked the hotel that you are going to stay at and figured out if you need to buy park tickets to get into the parks, once you have done all of those things, I think we can move on to the fun stuff. I think my favorite part of planning our couple of trips to Disneyland so far has been figuring out where we're going to eat. And I know that's kind of silly, but it has just been my favorite part. So the way that we have gone about figuring out where we're going to eat when we are visiting Disneyland is we have gone to the Disneyland website, which I will again have linked down below, and there you can find a comprehensive list of all of the restaurants at Disneyland. So what we've done when going into it, we had no idea where to start, where we would want to eat or anything. So Scott and I sat down and looked at the list of restaurants, and then any that sparked our interest, we went and looked at their menu. And then from there, we were able to make a shorter list of restaurants that actually had sparked our interest that we might want to eat at. So that took us maybe 30 minutes to an hour maximum that we went through and got our shorter list of places that we thought we would want to eat when we were visiting Disneyland. I believe that you can make your Disneyland dining reservations 60 days in advance, which is really great. But something that I have not liked about the process was that I think Disneyland only releases their park hours about 5 weeks in advance. It's about like between 4 and 6 weeks, I'm not exactly sure. But you can make your dining reservations 2 months in advance, and then you can only see the park hours about 1 month in advance. So if you're like me and you love the planning aspect and you really want to like perfectly plan out your days, what I like to do is for each day of our trip, figure out which park has the extra magic hour that morning. So Disneyland is different from Walt Disney World in that, at least in December when we have gone, they have an extra magic hour every morning, and how it goes is it alternates. Each day it's like extra magic hour at Disneyland, the next day is at California Adventure, and so on and so forth. So once I'm able to figure out which day, like if Monday has an extra magic hour at Disneyland, then I might want to make a dining reservation at Disneyland on Monday, because we're probably going to be spending our day at Disneyland on Monday because of the extra magic hour. I hope all of that makes sense. I know it's a little bit complicated. Basically, like I said, whichever day Disneyland has an extra magic hour, I want to make a dining reservation, whether it's for lunch or for dinner at Disneyland, because I know we're probably spending our day there. The reason that I do dining reservations next, like I said, I think it's the most fun part. I love eating in general. I mean, I just do. But I I love Disney restaurants. I think that they're just great experiences. It's a very fun thing for me to figure out which restaurants we're going to try. Like I said, Disneyland is still such a new thing for me. So this being our second trip, so it's been fun figuring out which restaurants we're going to try and which experiences we're going to have this time around. The reason that I do the dining reservations at this point is because, like I said, you can make dining reservations 60 days in advance. And I feel like everyone should. I feel like if there's a certain restaurant that you really need to eat at, like Napa Rose, I don't know how quickly they run out of reservations. Who knows? Maybe you can make reservations a week in advance. I'm not really sure because I've never done it that close to my vacation. But if they let me do it 60 days in advance, I like to do it 60 days in advance because I like to be prepared. I think that just one more thing you need to think about when figuring out which restaurants you want to eat at is, do you want to do all quick service while you're there? Say you're only there 2 days, you don't really want to do any table service, there's no room in your budget for any table service, you just want to do quick service, then you don't even need any reservations. That's just something you need to think about before you even go into all of the dining reservations, is if you want to do all quick service, then you don't even need reservations. So just pretty much skip this step altogether. But if you're like me, and like I said, I think dining at Disney is an experience in and of itself, and so I like to try to get the best dining experiences that I possibly can, so I make all of those reservations pretty much the 60 days in advance as soon as I can. Now, I think the next step after you have made your dining reservations, your 60 days in advance, when the park hours are released, then confirming that you have a good restaurant on each day, depending on where you want to be each day. So, you know, if on Tuesday, just say you know for sure that you want to spend your day in California Adventure, then maybe just try to have a reservation at a restaurant at California Adventure, because it's really going to save you some time rather than running back and forth, spending your day at California Adventure and then running over to Disneyland just for dinner and then running back. I feel having the reservations at the parks that you want to spend the day at is really helpful. And then once you have all that, you know which days you're going to spend at which parks, you know where you're eating that day. One of the final elements is when your trip gets closer, just having a game plan for each day that you go into it. Now this step is pretty optional. I think it's less optional now that we're going for our second time, and if people are going for their 10th or 100th or 1000th time, then you might not need to really put a lot of thought or effort into this step. But when we were going for our very first time, I definitely spent a lot of time figuring out when we were going to do what and on what days we were going to do what, prioritizing, figuring out, okay, it's our first day, I know that this attraction is so high on my list, I want to go and do it on the first day. And just having a game plan going into your trip to Disneyland is really, really helpful. Especially because I think something important to mention about that's different between Disneyland and Walt Disney World is that Walt Disney World has our My Magic Plus system now, where you can make fast passes like 90 days in advance, something like that. Disneyland doesn't have this system yet. Disneyland still has the amazing paper fast passes. So you get there, you have a game plan for your day, you have an idea of what you want to do for the day, and I think that's really helpful. And then you can kind of like tweak it and change it as you go. So I think that's something that's really fun about Disneyland. I think that the last thing that I need to talk about that requires a reservation is deciding if you are going to do any tours while you are at Disneyland. So our first trip in December 2015, I had so many people tell me you need to take the Walking in Walt's Footsteps tour. And just being the huge Disney fans that we are, I was like, done. You don't really need to tell me twice because that sounds like something that's right up my alley. So how it works for tours at Disneyland, you can make reservations 30 days in advance. So that was, again, something I had to open up my calendar that I had been using to plan our trip and figure out what day of the 5 days could we squeeze in a like 4 or 5 hour tour, whatever it was. So I had to figure out what day, and then I had to call them exactly 30 days in advance and say, I want to book this tour for 2 people, because I heard from a lot of people that it like sells out or it gets booked really quickly. So I recommend calling the 30 days in advance, but again, I have never done it closer to the date that I'm going, so maybe it's still possible to do it closer. I don't really know. But having done the Walking in Walt's Footsteps tour, I highly recommend it for anyone who is a big Disney fan or just a Disney history fan or a Walt Disney fan like I am. I love Walt Disney. I love learning about his life and how he came to create Disneyland. It is just really my passion, and that tour was such a great decision and it was worth every penny, and so I highly recommend it. Now, I think I have touched on this a little bit, but I think the final part of being prepared going into your trip to Disneyland is just having a game plan and having an idea of what it is you want to do when you're there. Prioritizing is such a huge part of this, so if you have a big family, make sure you sit down and talk about, or to the best of your ability, figure out what's everybody's priority while they're there, so that you make sure everybody leaves happy and having done the thing that they really wanted to do. My and Scott's first trip to Disneyland, we sat down and talked about like what are our priorities, what are our kind of like, we'll leave that till the end. If it gets done, cool. If it doesn't, no big deal. We definitely talked about it, and I think that something really important to remember is if you're going for your first time to Disneyland, don't go in blind. Like, don't go in having no idea what it is you want to do, because I think unless you're just that kind of person and it works for you, then do it. But for me, I know it was just so helpful for us to have a plan, and then I think there were a couple things that we wanted to do that we didn't get to, but it wasn't the end of the world because we're going back this year, and I think we did like 98% of everything we wanted to do, and the trip was just so great, I think, because we put so much planning and effort into it. So with all of that being said, I'm pretty sure that is just a good overview of how I have planned our 2 trips to Disneyland. I think deciding when you want to go, deciding for how long you can go, looking at plane tickets, hotels, and park tickets, and then from there, like I said, I think the fun stuff is making your dining reservations, figuring out which days you want to be at which park, and then from there just having a game plan of which attractions you want to hit when, and all of that kind of fun stuff. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed these couple of videos I've done on planning a trip to Disneyland. Like I've said multiple times, it has been so much fun for me, and I hope just if anything, someone got something out of this video or just really enjoyed hearing how I have planned our couple of trips to Disneyland. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and if you'd like to see any similar videos to this, or even I could try to do a couple of videos on how to plan a trip to Walt Disney World. I'm not as experienced on planning trips to Walt Disney World because I've always just lived here and gone for the day. But I have, of course, done like weekends here at Walt Disney World and stuff like that. Give this video a thumbs up if that's something you would like to see. Leave me a comment down below and say hello. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.